All right, we got everybody? If you're not here, raise your hand. There's always somebody that raises their hand, always. Like the whole group. All right, I realize it's 2:44 in the afternoon and you might not be fully here. I totally understand that. It's been a long day. It's been an awesome day. All right, I think we have most everybody. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk, for some of you, in walking all through that, it's like, all right, I got a little bit of that or not much of that. I'm going to walk us back through it using Blue Letter Bible again. But I'm also going, if you have desire, I'm just going to show you how to do some cutting and pasting, some copying. If you like to do these things on your computer, right? Some of you like to write them out. Some of you are just going to use the Blue Letter Bible to study some things and write it out. Some of you like to type things out. So if you want to prepare kind of a lesson document, all right, and you have Word or some other thing, all right, you can, right, open up Microsoft Word, and what I'm doing here on my screen, most of your screens, if you have a tablet or something, you can't do this, but you might not have known that you can split screen. So if you guys have, I get this big screen so that I can do this, and I'm going to do this so I can show you both these at the same time. But all you have to do is just go back and forth from screen to screen. So. Let's say we're going to do some Bible study, which we are about to do. I'm about to turn you loose on some text that you are going to do some study on, right? So if you want to create a computer document, then what you might want to do is open up a Word document, right? You can have that open. Then you're going to open up your Blue Letter Bible, right? And I'm going to half screen that. Everybody can still see that, right? Right? If it wasn't half screened, you would just be going here. And then you would downsize it and go to your Word. Then you would downsize Word and go back to your Blue Letter Bible, back and forth between. But I'm going to open them both up just so you can kind of see what I'm doing. All right. So you go to your Blue Letter Bible, and then you pick the passage that it is that you're going to study. So again, let's say we're going to study Philippians 1:7. So I type that in, I turn it to New American Standard because I don't want, all right. So can everybody get that far? You can type in a verse, and then you can put it into the proper version, NASB 95, and then you can look at the verse. There it is, okay? So I do that. Now let's say I wanted to, this passage I'm going to study, let's say I wanted to do Philippians 1, let's say, actually, let's go Philippians 3. Sorry, I meant Philippians 3. 3:7. All right, let's say I wanted to do 7 and 8. All right, so I could click here, and then I could go up to the top and I could hit copy. I could go over here. Boom, there it is. Everybody get that? If you want to do that, you could. So I went down here, I selected, all right, on the little pages thing here, the copy thing, Philippians 3, 7, and 8. Then I went back up here, I hit copy, and I put it over into my text if I wanted to create a little document in which I was writing these things down, okay? All right, so that's the passage I want to study. I copied the passage to over to my Word file, if that's what you want to do. Then the next part of the study, all right, and this, by the way, this is on your outline. It's the Blue Letter Bible study. I don't think it has any blanks. Does it have blanks on it? Okay, good. So this is just walking you through the message. You just walk through it with me, because this is what you're going to use when you're about to study the passage. There's some passages at the end of this that you can pick. We're going to make 3 or 4 of you that study together. All right, but if you want to put it into a Word document, you can do that. All right, now let's walk through this again. Let's identify the text. What kind of text is this? What genre? Narrative? Okay, it's epistle. All right, so you could put, if you wanted to, genre. All right, epistle. All right, so we've identified what it is. All right, now we're going to analyze the text. All right, to do that, you're going to read the context. All right, that's what we did. So Philippians 1. Right, so let's do this together quickly, or just let's work our way through it. So in Philippians 3, 7, and 8, he's saying, "But whatever things were gained to me, those things I've counted as loss for the sake of Christ. More than that, I count all things to be loss, in view of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I've suffered the loss of all things, and count them but rubbish that I may gain Christ." Actually, you know what? We probably shouldn't pick this passage because that's one that I have you already studying. So let me pick a different one. Let's go with Colossians 3:22 through 23. Sorry about that. So we'll just restart this real quick. Let's go. Yeah, so I'm gonna do 3:22 through 25. So let me quickly copy those. I'll just show you how to do that again. Boom, boom, boom. Through 25. Then I'll hit copy here. Way up there, copy. I'll highlight this. All right, there it is. And the genre is still epistle. All right, so now we're going to study this. All right, so let's study a little bit of the context here. We're coming down to verse 25. Let's begin in verse 8. Read verses 18 through 25, all right, and talk amongst yourselves. What's going on as Paul then gives them this command, whatever you do, do your work heartily. Who's he talking to? What has he said before? What's he said afterwards? Just write some of that down. What's the context of this? All right, this instruction comes in the context of what? So take just a couple minutes to talk with the partner at your table with this. Okay, 2 minutes or 1 minute. Okay, what's going on? So you're looking at Colossians 3:25, 23 through 25. What's the context? What's happening right before it? What happens right after it? What's Paul saying before? What's Paul saying after? Talk about that a little bit. Where does this command come in the context of what Paul is saying? Right? So what's he been saying? Who's he been talking to? Who's he talked to after this? All right, so what's the context here? Who's Paul talking to? When he gives this command, whatever you do, do your work heartily. Who's he talking to? What did he say before this, Jackson? Okay, what else? Anything else? Yep, Angela. All right, he's got fathers in there, giving them some instruction. So what's the overall picture? What kind of instructions is he giving? Yeah, John. Okay, in general, look, these are some very specific applications as to how you live. If you are a father, don't exasperate your children. If you are a child, do what? Be obedient to your parents in how many things? Just focus on this for a minute. All things, all right? Why? Because it's well-pleasing to the Lord. If you're a husband, what do? You love your wife. It's very fascinating. Don't be embittered against them. Right? It's a particular problem for men to be embittered against their wives when their wives don't do what they want or when they're disappointed in their marriage. Wives, be what? Subject to your husband. So it's talking about relationships, how to conduct relationships. All right, and then he gets down to slaves. And what's the primary relationship of a slave to a master? Was it a friendship relationship? Nope. It's a work relationship. Right? And in this case, if you're a slave, you are owned by the master. All right, so that's some of the context of this. All right, so you might put context on how believers live. Spelled something wrong. How to conduct relationships. Let's see if my thing will. Live. Got it. Relationships. If you guys don't have the free version of what's it called? That will autocorrect your stuff. You should have that. What's that? Grammarly, thank you. There's a free version. It can be annoying because it shows up all over and everything, but you just click on it and it shows you what you did wrong. It's pretty cool and it's free. If your parents let you have that kind of thing, that'd be awesome because I make lots of mistakes. Instructions on how to live, instructions on how to conduct relationships. Okay, that's context. Now we're going to ask ourselves our questions, all right? So observation. All right, observation questions. First one is, who's involved, all right? So we already said slaves. Who else is involved in this? Okay, well, actually, just in this text, really 23 through 25, is there anyone else? All right, the Lord. Okay, good. All right, masters, they're not direct in this context, but there's actually kind of at the end here, they're in view, all right, because we're talking about who you obey and who you don't. All right, good. Masters, people you're working for. Anybody else? Okay, so those are some of your characters. And and who is being addressed here specifically? Okay, slaves, but slaves that are what? The book is written to whom? The church, right? So it's written to believing slaves or slaves at the church at Colossae. So slaves, believing slaves, Christians, we'll do it this way. All right, Christian Colossae. All right, then the Lord, masters. Okay. Next question is circumstance. So this one was the character. All right, anything about the circumstances here that we want to know? What's happening? All right, so anything about these circumstances? What are slaves doing? They're working, all right? Slaves at work. Okay, anything else? Okay, slaves who are slaves at work, slaves. Okay. Now, when you have epistles, there's not usually a lot going on in the circumstances. Sometimes there is, sometimes not. In narrative, you're going to get a lot more when it comes to like circumstances, things like that. All right, geography. Where is this taking place? City of Colossae. All right. Any much else to learn? Maybe in the master's estate. Okay, if you want to kind of think through that. Where are they working? You're working wherever your master is. Okay, so that might be some of the geography. All right, chronology. When is this happening? Broad. Now, by the way, you could look at your introduction to the book of Colossians. There's those MacArthur introductions and other things. And it would tell you generally when the book of Colossians was written, right? I'm pretty sure it was written somewhere around, I forget my dates, 45 to 49, I think, AD. That's a guess. You can look that up. You could look that up later. There we go. I was way off. 60 to 62. Thanks. All right, chronology, 60 to 62 AD. Anything else that, the time frame in which we're talking? Okay. Let's think about what's going on in 60 to 62 AD in relationship to slavery. And where is the city of Colossae? What's the circumstance? What empire is it part of? Roman. So it's part of the Roman Empire. Okay, so let's do it this way. Slavery was common. Just some different ideas on what's happening during that time. So you might write some of that stuff down. All right. Next, we're going to ask some interpretive questions. So, why is Paul writing? So you guys talk amongst yourselves. Why would Paul write this? What exactly is he telling them to do, right? And why? All right. So why is Paul writing? What is he telling them to do? Why is he telling them to do it? All right. So take 2 or 3 minutes, talk amongst yourselves, come up with an answer for us. Give us a little. This is just your own personal observations, what you know. So why is he writing? What is he telling them to do, and why? Did I do two whys? Who's he writing to? All right, who's got an answer for us? Why? What? Why is he doing this? Okay. Who wants to answer? Yes, Tyler. Yeah, help Tyler out there. Why would they be conflicted? What would be the problem? Right. So they're supposed to be serving the Lord. They're free in Christ, and here they have these masters who say they own them. Shouldn't they just be able to say, "Hey, we're free. We don't have to do what you say," right? Which might have been something they wanted to do. Selena. Okay. Right. So a lot of interpretation there. Look, they had unbelieving masters. That would be hard to do. But what he's telling them is, look, it doesn't matter who your master is because Christ is your master. Good. And so that should make it easy or easier for you to serve because you're serving Christ. Good. Anything else that you guys got out of that? Yes, Bethany. Okay, and I would say if you're thinking of it in terms of what writing to them, he was telling them to do that. He might also be telling us to do that, but we don't know that yet. Now you're doing some initial interpretation, so you'd be saying, all right, that's to us too. It's fine. Gabriel. Okay, excellent. All right, so they are not to be working for the master, or certainly not for the master only, but because they are working for God himself. All right? Anything else? Quentin. Yeah. All right. So if you don't obey, things aren't going to go well for you. So, be aware of this fact. You're a slave. You can't get out of that. So you can't just say, "Well, I'm a Christian, so I'm not going to obey you, and I'm fine." Nope. You're going to be in big trouble. Good. Anything else? Okay. So that's some initial interpretations that you're going to be making. There obviously could be more. All right. And then, interpretive questions we already. So you're doing that. So in your interpretations. Now, any questions that you have here? So let's think about what are some questions that we might need to answer. So what questions would you have? Yep, Angela. 23 essentially to 25. Sure, you can look in the context. That's fine. So that's the question you would ask. How do we know who they're talking to? Yeah. So that's a question, right? We'd have to look in our context. Since I just told you 23, good. Who is being? What other questions might you have? There's kind of a glaring one here, Angela. Okay, sure. That's a great question. What inheritance are they going to get? I mean, what kind of reward is that, John? Yeah, how's it apply to us? Are any of you slaves? Now I know you feel. Yes, I am. I'm slave to my parents. I'm slave to my teacher. No, you're not actually slaves. Nobody owns you directly. They didn't pay for you. All right. So how does this apply? Okay, so if you're kind of thinking through concerns, you're like, all right, so he's talking to slaves. Why doesn't he just tell them to be free, or why, what's going on? So what is biblical, or what was slavery like in biblical times? Okay, good. Anything else? Other questions? Okay, how does that difference work? All right, serving men or serving God. What else? Jackson. Yeah, what are the consequences? What else? Yeah, what's that? I mean, is that appropriate? Anything else? Those are good questions, right? I might ask also a question like, what does it mean to work heartily? You might just automatically know what that means, but what is hearty work? Not hardly working, but hearty working. Okay. Some other questions I might ask. What is it? What's partiality? How might that work? What does it mean that it's without partiality? Okay. So we had what's the inheritance? How do we get the inheritance? Okay. All right, there might be some other questions you would ask. So that's what you're doing when you are studying. So you're writing that down, questions. Now, let's identify some of the key words and concepts here. So what key words are we going to want to look at? All right, so what are some of them as you look at that? Okay, yeah, so the idea of work, and maybe we'll just put even the concept of work, for now we'll put work heartily, all right? Because that's the modifier for work. So maybe that's one word, maybe that's two, we don't know, right? In English it's two words, but in Greek it might be one, I'm not sure. What else do we want to look at? Inheritance, what is that? What else? All right, so maybe, yes, so consequences. Maybe we'll just put consequences of wrong. Okay, what else? Warren? Okay, yeah, so that's, I put it under A there, work heartily. What is that? All right, any other specific words we're probably going to want to look at, or phrases? Yep, Angela. Yes, okay, so what does that mean? We're going to look up that word. Probably, okay. Hey, what else? Reward, okay, so we have, we might want to look up that word. We looked up inheritance, but, all right, what else? Quentin? Yeah, what are we talking about? How would we define that? Good. All right. Sincerity of hearty. Okay. Okay, yep. Maybe we would want to look up the two concepts, some of the questions we asked. What is work for the Lord, or work as for the Lord? And what is work for men? There's some of the concepts and phrases that we find there. We might want to look up the word serve. There's another verb in there, will receive, so we probably already know what that means, but all right, might want to look that up. Okay. We might want to look up the word, do we have wrong done here yet? What's that wrong? All right. Okay, anything else? All right, so you've identified some of the things that you want to look up. Now is where you go to your interlinear on your Blue Letter Bible. So if you had this, your tools, Colossians 3:23, we'll start here and we'll look for our tools. Going to open up our interlinear. All right, and we have ha ion, poite, ke fuxes, that's wrong. Yeah, so 23. Egreseste hosto kurio kai uk anthropos. So whatever. Now we didn't really talk about that. So maybe back over here. So let's consider whatever you do. Like whatever ever, or so are there certain things? Okay. Whatever you do. All right. So let's look up Notice it's do your work is, so as we're working our way through here, whatever, I mean, we could look that up, so let's do that real quick. Whatever, we just went to something else, hang on. Back, I clicked on the wrong thing. All right, so whatever, did I click on the Strong's word? I did. Right, so whatever, it's a, right? No particular thing here that is really going to tell us much about how we could show the Strong's info on whatever. All right, it's a relative pronoun. It doesn't tell us much, right? Biblical usage, it can be used, who, what. So, okay, not much there. So whatever just is pretty much any particular thing, right? So I might go over here, whatever you do, right? Anything that is required when working for a master. And maybe I would put here, it doesn't seem to be without, doesn't seem like there's any qualification, right? It says whatever you do, doesn't say like, well, if you had something else. Yes, Angela. No, we're just on, I started on verse 23. Very good. All right, so whatever you do, why would we assume that it is slaves? Well, one, it's our context. Two, it's talking about masters, so that's why. So you were saying maybe it applies to everybody. Right, and I would say because that's a great question and a good observation, but because it changed to saying slaves. Actually, it says so. It's in verse 18. So verse 22. Since it said slaves, the fact that we're only studying verses 23. Now, I could have chose verse 22, but because 23 tells us that already, it limits it. Right, so 23 says slaves in all things obey, and so then when we look at 23, we're relating that to 22. Right, so these instructions in 23 through 24 are related directly to the slaves. There's no reason to say just 22 is to slaves and then it switches back to everyone. That's a great question and a great thought, but I think our understanding here is that this applies to people who are doing this particular work because it talks about the nature of how they're serving. But it is a good question as to why would we immediately say that. Good. All right, so we're on 23, using our interlinear. Do your work. Let's look up that. So work heartily. It says do your work heartily. So let's first look up do your work. All right, so we'll look on that. All right, so the verb is ergozomai, and it means, according to the Strong's, to toil. So what I might want to do here is I'm like, I don't want to have to type all that out. So I'll just go like this. I'll grab that. I'll copy it. I'll put it here. I'm going to break these up because I'm looking at two different words. So I'll do work. And I'll put that there. And then I'm going to look up heartily in just a minute. All right. So that's my Strong's definition. The biblical usage of this, right, to work to labor. Okay. Pretty much just to work. You can work as in hard labor that you do. You might do some kind of business work. To exercise, right, to work for. So pretty much the idea of working, and in this case, working for your master. So probably not too much else, except I could put the verb down, and so then I would have a definition of it. So now let's look up this word heartily, suke, right? Fascinating word. So let's see what it means. Okay, so the word actually means, as we will see, right? It's the word essentially for spirit or soul, all right? So, and it can come from the word breath, all right? So it's essentially that which distinguishes the spiritual part or the internal part of a person, not viewing them externally. And that's kind of the whole contrast, by the way, as we'll see in this text, the external work that you do as opposed to what's going on inside of you. Do your work from the inside, essentially, is the idea. And then, so if you're looking it up, so it's translated soul, life, mind, heart, and in this case, it's translated as an adjective, that we do it with heart. And so what would with heart be? So we can look at this. It can be just breath, just life. The soul, oftentimes this word translates the word soul, okay? And then we can look at some places where this word, well, we'll do that in a minute. All right, so the idea that you're working, with your soul, or you're working, the idea of your internal attitude as you work. All right, so we might want to copy that just so we have that information. Okay, so the idea of, again, the internal attitude with which we work. All right, then I'm not going to do all of these, but you could look up inheritance. There's a variety of things you could look up. Let's look at inheritance real quick. That from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. Let's look up reward. All right, so we got the Strong's info here. I love this. This is Judah's favorite thing. If you have a definition, the definition of reward is reward. Requital, that what you get for something that you have done. All right. Biblical usage generally, right, to be repaid for something that you do, a recompense. Right? So that's pretty basic. It's something you get, in this case, for something that you did. All right, so I could write that here. All right, so you might write that down, and then we'll look at inheritance real quick. All right, so the Strong's info. All right, so some kind of possession that you receive. All right, so it's not giving us much more. The idea, it's some kind of property received from someone else, that which is given. And then here, the eternal blessedness of the consummated kingdom of God, which is to be expected after the visible return of Christ. Whoa, where did that come from? The idea that you're receiving the benefits of the kingdom of God. Right? Now notice I didn't give you any verses. They're just drawing that information out from other places where this word, this particular word is used, this idea of an inheritance. So on this one, let's just take a moment. Let's say you're like, so that doesn't really, I don't know for sure what it means. Let's look at some of the verses that have to do with inheritance. And just kind of a key here is oftentimes you're not going to look in the Gospels because it will generally just be used in ways that are going to be more obvious. Oftentimes you will look in the epistles to see where it's used more theologically. All right? So, because remember that the epistles are the explanation of the things that Jesus said in the Gospels, generally. All right, so inheritance, Genesis 3:18, the inheritance is based on law. That doesn't help us too much. Ephesians 1:14, who is given as a pledge of our inheritance. That's the Holy Spirit, so you could look up some of the context there, right? Again, so something that we're going to receive. All right, so I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened so that you will know what is the riches, the hope of his calling, where are the riches of the glory of his inheritance in the saints. This has to do with something that we receive along with the saints, and maybe even that the saints are part of that inheritance, right? As you know with certainty, no immoral or impure person, a covetous man who is an idolater has an inheritance. So it appears to be part of the inheritance just the fact that you get the kingdom or that you get to be in the kingdom. All right, Colossians 3:24 that we had. So there's some other things, and you might say, here we go. 1 Peter 1:4, to obtain an inheritance which is imperishable and undefiled and will not fade away. It doesn't give us an exact definition of it, but it does tell us that it's reserved in heaven, right? And now we'd have to try to figure out, okay, is this talking about the same inheritance? It's the same word, but let's assume we thought, it probably is. So I'm just going to, actually, I think I can copy that whole. I just go like this. I can go up here. I can copy it, and I'll put this here for inheritance. And again, you can just write that down on your piece of paper or whatever if you're not doing it this way, and boom. I have that, so I'm gonna use that maybe when I teach my lesson to talk about the inheritance we receive. The blessings and benefits of spending eternity with Christ in heaven and all of the joys that entails, and it's reserved for us, right? And it is part of the reward that we receive. And yet, it appears from the book of Colossians that part of receiving that reward is obedience that demonstrates the reality of our salvation. Now, it's a lot packed into that. Right? So then you'd want to be working through, what does it mean to work as for the Lord? To work for men, work as expend energy. You could look up the word energeo, other sorts of things. All right, so you're going to work your way through using the interlinear to look at the phrases, look at the words, look at the definitions, and then sometimes look at the verses that are related. Any questions there as far as how I actually did that? Is everybody kind of tracking with how I got that done? All right. So then the next thing we're going to do, you're just writing down anything that you learned from that, right? What you're thinking through, how that's helping you understand these. Sometimes the definitions of the words oftentimes what happens is people try to rely on that. Well, this word has some secret definition. Well, inheritance, you probably pretty much understood what that was, right? Something you get that is given to you at the end of something, or when someone passes away, or when you move into a particular time. So you can say some of those things. Often you want to back that up with Scripture so that you are sure that you're correct when you have that understanding. But don't think you're going to get lots of new information necessarily about a particular word simply by its definition. Oftentimes you already pretty well understand. You know what it means to work. All right, and probably you have an idea of what it means to work heartily. It's just sometimes when you look at the words, it can help you. That idea of soul, right, that's how heartily was the word it came from. It's just a really helpful thing to think, oh, this is really talking about my internal attitude, my internal effort, which then is going to extend out into my external effort. I'm working with all of my heart. All right, so you're doing a bunch of that. Then the next thing you're doing, all right, after you've done your word studies, you look up the definitions, you look up other verses, all right, if you can determine the tense of those verbs. Now let's look at some other Bible passages. So this is 7. You're looking at your cross-references. We're going to look at other Bibles first. So we'll do that. I think we're on F or G, other translations, and see if they say anything different. So we'll go here to our Bibles tab. Just going to go back. Where'd my tab go? Colossians 3:23. Sorry. Go to my tools. That must not be. Let's do this. Yeah, go to my Bibles. Okay. So then I'm going to read down through and see if there's any different concepts here. Do your work heartily. With all your heart, it says NIV. From the heart, says CSB. With enthusiasm, says the net. Right? Again, not all these are. So some of those, where's my amplified? Whatever you do, and notice this gives some definitions, whatever your task may be. Work from the soul, that is, put in your very best effort. All right, so again, the Amplified kind of is bringing out some of that study that you just did, and you can verify some of that because you already looked at the word soul, right? Or you looked at the word heartily. So you're going to write out anything that might be helpful. Maybe you would put in here this particular verse. So you might copy that, stick it into your Word document for other translations, Amplified. And you put in, right? So you might write the Amplified version said this. All right, so you look at your versions. Then the next thing you're going to do is do your cross-references. So we'll go back to here, pick up our cross-references, and you would need to cross-reference each of the verses because the cross-reference applies to the individual verses themselves. So 323, I'm looking at my cross-references. Right? Got to give me some different, right? So there's some good thoughts here, right? So bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me. So that might be idea. With all my heart I have sought you. So some Old Testament passages that might apply to doing something with all that you are. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. So these are some verses you might pull in and say, these are some explanations of this particular verse. Here's the idea of with a sincere love, fervently love one another from the heart. Just some ideas that might help you when you're understanding this word from the heart, whatever you do. All right, so you're looking through your cross-references to see if there's anything helpful for you, pulling in anything that might be. Oh, by the way, this might be helpful. Ephesians chapter 6 really is kind of a sister passage to this. It's talking about serving your masters, not by way of eye service as men pleasers, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. So it's going to give you another, some more information about this same concept of serving masters and how we do that. All right? Then you're going to write out a brief explanation of the text. That's number 9. So you're going to put a general summary of what you learned. Then you're going to record any problems that you might have. Right? Write out the things that you're thinking, okay, this is the meaning. And then for your final study, all right, you're going to, let's now think through some things. How does this apply to us? If you aren't a slave, so I'm just going to go all the way here to universal principles. All right, so what are some things how might this apply to us even though we're not slaves? Quentin. Okay. All right, so one, this might tell us how we serve him. We're to serve him with all our heart. We certainly wouldn't serve him with any less fervency than we would actual slave masters. What else? Gina. Right, so you are an employee, you're not a slave, but most of the work was done back in those times by slaves. That was the master-employee relationship. All right, so you might be thinking, there's probably some good principles here for when I'm serving a master as an employer in their sphere of authority, right? Where I'm supposed to be doing what they say, working at their store or working for them, certainly these principles would apply. But also it seems to me these principles would apply, say, at home. It does seem like there's some, and if you do cross-referencing, you'll find there are general principles of work, which is we always are to do all of our work with all of our heart. You can't ever do your math homework half-heartedly just because your parents aren't actually your masters, as in they don't own you. Well, they do, no. But that you're not a slave underneath them, yet that doesn't give you an excuse for half-hearted work. Let's think about it this way. If you were supposed to serve the worst, in one sense, in the worst possible situation, that of being totally owned by someone else. If you were supposed to serve with a whole heart and not be resentful and not be angry and not try to get out from under it, what does that say about every other work environment where it's easier? You ought to be that much more able to do it with all your heart, to do it without complaining, to do it in a way that would please the Lord. So it's kind of an argument from the greater to the lesser. The harder problem is being a slave. It's a lot easier to be doing your schoolwork under delightfully wonderful parents. It's a lot easier to be working at Chick-fil-A under incredibly great supervisors when compared to masters who might own you, who might, nobody at Chick-fil-A actually owns you your whole life, right? So thinking about how it should be actually even easier for us, and that this whole idea of we don't work for just what the people around us think. I mean, is that true only with masters and slaves? Can you then work just for your own what you want in your schoolwork or at your other jobs? That's going to be a universal application that applies across the board. All right, so those are ways that you could then take some universal principles that apply to all of us, and then you could make some applications. So I've already made some, but what are some of the additional applications that you might make or those to that idea of working heartily? Where would this apply? How would you, are there any other places where you might do this? Or did I exhaust them all? All right. Okay, so let's talk about an application of, let's say you're not getting much reward for the work that you do. Right? You don't feel like maybe you're working and you're not getting paid a lot, or you're at home and you don't feel like you're well appreciated. What does the text tell us should be our desire? Yep, Quentin. Yeah, you can imagine what a blessing that was to a slave who was working and getting what? Nothing. Right? They were getting paid for it. That's what they were supposed to do. And Paul says, look, you don't have to get a reward from them. but you still have to work hard, even though you're getting no reward from that master, yet you're supposed to work with all your heart, because we are conditioned to work for what we get back right now. Like, look, if you're not paying me right, I'm not going to work hard. If I'm not getting back from you what I consider to be just compensation, whether it's appreciation of my work or other things, I'm going to slough off. I saw this when I was working at McDonald's as a manager. I saw it all the time. I'm not being treated right. You haven't given me what I need. I'm not being paid enough, so therefore I don't have to work hard. And my question always was, why are you here? If you're working here, you are to work hard. Right? And again, we have the privilege of being able to go from place to place. You could go somewhere else, but learn a lesson early. There is no perfect workplace. There certainly are no perfectly wonderful bosses. There are some better than others. And if you can find better places to be, great. But what you're generally going to find is that if you didn't learn to work heartily as unto the Lord in the worst place, you're not going to do that in the best place. You're just going to be working according to whatever you get. And so you're always going to gauge your response to the things you get back. Guys, that's a horrible way to live. It's not a biblical one. And when things are hard for you, you're going to stop working and you're going to be mad at the Lord. I'm not getting what I want. I'm not getting what I thought I deserved, so I don't have to work hard. This principle is really important. So some things you want to think about. All right, it's 3:30. Any questions on the process of how this is done? Because you're about to have to do it. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I'd like you to try to pick 3 or 4 people in a group. Or if there's 2 of you, that's fine. If you want to do it with 2, that's okay. But 3 or 4, 2 or 3 or 4. If you look in the back of your notebook, and my iPad just died, so I don't know what does anybody have an extra book? You have like 5 passages that you can look at. So now I'm okay if you want to pick your own passage to study, as long as you think you can get through it because on these, I put like study text 1, Philippians 1, 9 to 11. I put down answer a bunch of these questions, keywords, and then explanations. If you want to just do one on your own, great, but you got to do the same thing. So if you came in this week going, man, I really want to know what this particular passage means, great, you can pick your own. Needs to be 3 to 4 verses, probably not more than that. So what I want you to do is pick one of these or pick your own, then work through this process, answer these questions, have some other scriptures, get some cross-references, and then I want you to figure out, and with an explanation of the text, you're going to write out, and then you're going to give us that presentation. Probably be a shortened portion of it, yes. Yes, absolutely. So you don't have to sit here. You can go do that somewhere else, yep. An outline would probably be better because it will take you longer to write it out perfectly. So I would write out an outline of bullet points, and you could just really read the answers to those questions if you wanted to, or add anything else that you have. All right? Now, I would prefer that you stay inside. I know it's beautiful outside, all right, but I prefer that you stay inside. That just keeps everybody kind of in the same area because I do want you to use your tools. Now, if you have your phone, I know you can go outside and do that. But so stay inside. Stay pretty much, top, any of the 3 levels, but stay visible so everybody can see where you're at. And then you're going to have 1 hour to do this. All right. If everybody's done, if you're done super fast, you can come back in here and let me know. So I'll kind of know if everyone's done. Then we'll go, okay, now let's have our thing. But this will probably take you about that long. Any other questions? All right. Make sure everybody's in a group and ready break. 1 hour. The clock is ticking. I'm expecting preachable exposition by the time we're done. Yes.